I think I fell for that same sort of premise with the smartphone being like, oh, I can make my commute productive because now I have a computer that fits in my pocket. And I think what the light phone really asks the user to do is be a little bit more conscious and intentional with which devices you use and when. For me, I love having email dedicated to this one laptop where I can open and close it. I found myself checking email before I brushed my teeth. And, that's just not a great foot to start your day on, to be already stressed out about some client email before I've even like given myself a chance to like read and enjoy a coffee and like appreciate that it's spring or whatever is happening in the world.
You're listening to the Genius Scouts podcast with Justin Oberman and Aaron Zakowski. Join us each week as we bring you exclusive conversations with the business leaders and innovators you need to know about, sharing the secrets that fuel their success and power their personal brands. Let's dive in.
Today's guest co-founded a tech company that wants you to use your phone less, and people love it. Joe Hollier is the co-founder of Lightphone, the minimalist phone that's becoming a movement. The newly launched Lightphone 3 is making waves, blending intentional design with just enough tech to stay connected without the scroll.
So Joe's, what's interesting is that Joe's journey from multidisciplinary artist to tech entrepreneur is anything but conventional. He graduated from valedictorian from the School of Visual Arts, SVA, which Aaron, is a school that I once took graphic design courses, continuing education, when I wanted to learn how to become a creative director as a copywriter. And it's a really, really great school. So it's no wonder that he came out of there and is doing what he's doing. After that, he ran a design studio, and he's even had his work commissioned by the Smithsonian. All this before co-founding Light in 2014. Joe, welcome to Genius Scouts.
Thanks so much.
Well, Joe, I'm really excited to speak with you, especially when our producer, Chris, brought you up. I don't know, maybe you can help me put a date to this, but I believe I'm one of the first people to buy a light phone, and for the very first one. I think it was maybe from the Kickstarter. All I remember is that I got the phone, and I also got a T-shirt that had a picture of like a landscape on it. I still have the T-shirt. I couldn't find it. I wanted to wear it today, but I don't know. When was that?
That would have been May of 2015 that we launched our first Kickstarter campaign for the original iPhone, and the very earliest, I think maybe 200 backers got a free T-shirt. So that, yeah, you would have been in the very top first batch.
There you go. I'm one of the first 200 people to buy a light phone. Look at that. Ha ha. I'll tell you what happened. I loved it. I had it. Who loved it more than anyone was my wife. But I left it in the pocket one day, and it went through the washing machine, and didn't survive that. I don't know why I didn't go and just get another one, but I really, really enjoyed it. Did I enjoy it, or did I enjoy my life?
Well,
really the question.
Yeah. Especially with the original iPhone, we were using this design philosophy we kind of coined called design to be used as little as possible. So to that point, the goal of the light phone was that actually you completely forgot you had this thing, maybe accidentally leave it in the pocket because you are not distracted, not feeling this, constant phantom notification freezing to like FOMO check and recheck your phone, dozens
Right.
of times again and again. So I think, any value that the light phone gave people wasn't because it had some feature of Bluetooth or, some new game or some new piece of tech. It was really about the kind of stepping away from the smartphone and internet at large and carving out these intentional moments that you wanted to be more present in your life.
It's really interesting because I remember when I got it, one of the big questions that people had for me was, so like you leave your phone at home, you leave your iPhone at home, and like you go out with it. Because I was using it in that hybrid mode. I remember like you had to like it was like a little cumbersome to turn on and this and that, but it was like, it was totally worth it. And so I'd go out on a date with my wife, and I would, the light phone. I remember the one question that people kept asking me was, well, Well, it's like, well, I guess it's not a big deal if you have GPS in your car. I'm like, no, I don't have GPS in my car. And they're like, well, how do you know where you're going? And I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, I'm Gen X, so I actually grew up kind of like with maps, and also a willingness to ask for directions when I don't know, and hear the directions and then kind of understand what they're talking about. And I think that's like not a thing that a lot of people these days have it. So, but I understand your new product has more features on it. So you mentioned something interesting before. You mentioned that the first iPhone was built on a design philosophy, and I forget what it was that you called it. So the new ones are built on a different philosophy.
Not necessarily, but the new phones do introduce a new level of utility where the original light phone, for context, only made phone calls. So, by adding things like a contact book, text messaging, we were encouraging this to be more of a phone that you would use for larger chunks of time, if not completely replacing your smartphone, rather than this kind of hybrid model. Um, and so, we still design the Light phone today, whether that's the 2 or this upcoming Light phone 3, with that same intentionality. We want you to open the phone with a purpose in mind, whether that's to set a timer, to get directions, to, ask someone a question. So we still believe the phone is designed to be used as little as possible, but I think it was the most apparent in that first iteration. And I think when we thought about utility, we heard so many people ask about directions. Similar to your anecdote, people are like, I wish I could, but how would I ever get around? And the Light phone 2, when we first launched it, we mentioned that we wanted to add directions, but day one, when it started shipping, it only had an alarm and the phone, which included texting and calling and such. So there was this gap period of about 18 months where some users bought the phone and it didn't yet have directions. And one interesting thing we realized was that a lot of users would come back to us and say, I thought that was going to be the deal breaker, but actually I feel super self-empowered that like I was able to get around my city. And now I'm like paying more attention to landmarks and I have just a better
Whoa.
orientation. So they were able to almost like rewire their brain a little bit to be a better navigator. And they had become so dependent on their smartphone that they weren't even looking at where they were going really. And you hear these stories of people like driving off of roads that are dead end roads because they're just following the GPS almost blindly. So, there was something beautiful about empowering people to have it, like to get around on their own. But I think, having directions, we also understand that that's just a peace of mind for a lot of people, not getting lost and being able to find their way home. Or, I know the subway in New York super well, having lived here forever, but for some people that's such an intimidating thing, and having that peace of mind that like, yeah, I get some directions, I think makes sense. So we added utility to make it easier for people to go light, but without compromising on what going light fundamentally represents.
Joe, so how do you figure out, which additional utilities are okay to add on to a product like this and which ones go too far? Because obviously, the idea is that we use our phones less, but I think some of us are wired that we're still going to look for distractions. I think back to the early Nokia phones that we had, in the early 2000s and such, and they didn't do a whole lot. They probably do less than a light phone, but yet we still had Snake on it, and we found our ways to distract ourselves. And people just played with their calculators or whatever it is. How do you figure out, what's critical that we need without going too far? Like, where's that balance?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's definitely potentially can start to sound like a slippery slope. So it's something we're kind of
Right.
always iterating and making sure we have a very clear line drawn with our users. And I think for us, it's really about limiting these sort of infinite feeds. So we say there's no social media, there's no email, there's no internet browser, and there's no news. And basically, this encompasses things like advertising and attention-based platforms that are, there to maximize engagement. Even something like email, which, borders on productivity and utility in many cases. A lot of us use it day in and out for work, but actually is something that we find ourselves checking and rechecking, and often brings a lot of anxiety when we're actually trying to separate ourselves from work and maybe find quote unquote work-life balance a little bit better. So I think for us, each tool that we add, it has to have a clear purpose and a clear ending. It's not like you're going to discover something. So even when you use like our podcast tool, you have to pre-plan which podcast you're going to have on the phone from your dashboard website ahead of time,
So there's no
so that as
searching
much
of
as
podcasts.
possible, Sorry about that.
I said, so there's no search in podcasts. You can't just kind of look for something to listen to.
Exactly, from the device itself. So, we want to encourage people being intentional in setting up those things so that when they're finding themselves, waiting for a train for 10 minutes, they're not just tinkering with the settings of the phone because there's nothing else to think about. So we really try in all aspects to make the phone as boring, so to speak, as possible. And I think it's in those moments when you finally are confronted with this, the phone can't do anything. You pull it out for the fourth time in a row and there's nothing to check, no one to text, that you are able to overcome and, start to actually be more present. And I think that's actually like where the magic starts to happen.
So where would you think about that trade-off? I remember back when smartphones were becoming a thing, maybe around 15 years ago or so, and we felt that suddenly we were untethered to our offices in a sense that, I can spend more time with my family because I can bring the work with me a little bit. And therefore, but therefore, this was the argument we had, right? That I didn't have to be in the office. I was able to be more mobile. I can go and be at the event with my kids or whatever it might be. I could just step away for a couple minutes, check the work thing, and get back to my kids. And yet we also see this other side of it, as you obviously know, that we also become consumed by it. Like how does that balance work in terms of the product of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I fell for that same sort of premise with the smartphone being like, oh, I can make my commute productive because now I have a computer that fits in my pocket. But I think, unfortunately, what sort of happens, and this is probably somewhat by design and somewhat by just like inherent human vulnerability, is that, we have a really hard time balancing that in actual practice. Um, and I think what the light phone really asks the user to do is like, obviously I have this laptop here, how I'm communicating with y'all and how I run the light phone business day in and out is to, be a little bit more conscious and intentional with which devices you use and when. And so basically how you connect with the internet and when you're connecting with the internet. For me, I love having email dedicated to this one laptop where I can open and close it. So if I've closed the laptop and I have to like write something, a little bit more of like a deep focus hour, I'm not just like seeing emails come in and whack-a-mole style getting distracted with each little ping. I'm able to like close it and be like, for the next hour or two, I'm working on this bigger task and then I'll check email. And then after hours, I'm not checking my email when I'm out on a date. I'm able to be present and sort of carve out these boundaries for myself. And I wouldn't say it's like a one size fits all. Like all of our users sort of have different technological tools, whether it's a tablet or even sometimes an old smartphone with no SIM card that they keep around and use to, have this sort of balance. But they're just more intentional than having it all in this device that they have with them 24/7. I think I found myself checking email before I brushed my teeth. And, that's just not a great foot to start your day on, to be already stressed out about some client email before I've even like given myself a chance to like read and enjoy a coffee and like appreciate, that it's spring or whatever is happening in the world. I'm sort of just like immediately confronted with news, bad news.
So, but like, okay, so if somebody's communicating with you or they work with you, so like this kind of like is your brand, right? Like the people will kind of understand. Okay, I emailed, so and if he's out, he's not going to see the email and check it. But like the demand side of the email, it's not just us, right? It's not just us that have become used to like constantly checking email. It's also the other people who have also come to expect almost like immediate responses to things. Like you see all the time the joking, like with, if the girl doesn't text you back in 10 seconds or, like if somebody texts you and you expect at least a response in an hour or two or whatever. Um, how do you, well, I guess my question would be, how do you handle that? And then how are what kind of feedback are you hearing from users? Is a 3-point question. And the third one is like, what advice would you give to people who are trying to do this, trying to minimize their technology?
Yeah, I think uh, what I've found really effective for me is just transparency and open communication. I think it's easy, and the default is to feel that everyone has these expectations built in. That if someone messages you, you feel obliged to reply as quickly as possible because they're expecting a reply. And what I've found is that way more people are so open to meeting you where you'd like to be and actually having that conversation is quite simple. So, that's sort of touching upon a little bit of all the questions in that I think we have more agency than we realize. And this goes for beyond just like switching to a light phone. I think some people have been like, I realize like I can talk to my wife and be like, hey, when you text me every 4 minutes and freak out when I don't reply right away, like I'm actually just like working on this and like during these hours, like please don't expect me to be as on my phone because it's counterintuitive to this other thing I'm trying to do. And like instead of like having this friction where they're like tethered to the phone because they just have the conversation and realize like, oh, actually we can agree to like, what makes the most sense. And for, light phone in a very practical way, my team knows the sort of hierarchy of priorities. If it's something urgent, I'm going to get a call or a text and I'll find my way to a computer as quickly as possible. If they send an email, I'll definitely see it within 24 hours most of the time, especially during the work week, but I might not see it within the hour. And it might be the next morning if it's, in the late evening or something. So, just sort of like a cadence for like how urgent something is. And that's been, super helpful for my productivity, but also just like keeping that like mental wellness in check during what is, a pretty stressful operation.
It's interesting. I remember when cell phones first came out, and I remember my grandfather. My grandfather's a Holocaust survivor, and I remember we got him a cell phone, and I remember I was out with him, and it was a flip phone, and he opened it up. I had like a Nokia, one of those little Nokia brick things, and I remember he opened it up. He called my grandmother, right, and then I watched him, and he turned the phone off and then closed it. And so I thought, oh, okay, he doesn't understand. I said, Papa, you don't have to turn the power off. And he goes, I know. I was like, well, why'd you turn the power off? And he goes, because I have a phone for me, not for them. Like I have like the phone is for my convenience. It's not
I want
for anybody.
to.
Yeah, it's not for people to get in contact with me whenever I want. And I remember like that's really stuck with me. And it's also kind of interesting because I've seen that um I look at like I remember also seeing like Warren Buffett, like someone's like, what cell phone do you have? And Warren Buffett like took out this phone that was,
Flip
like was like
phone, right?
taped
Yeah, or
and
something.
stuff. And he's like, and he doesn't carry an iPhone. And it's like, okay, but he doesn't have to, right? He's got probably like people with him at all times. And he's got, and he can demand it. He can say, you want to reach me, you call me. Right. And it looks like that phone's been used a lot. And I was also watching, I was reading something about Ryan Holiday, the guy who does all the Stoic books. And so he's prolific online. But apparently he doesn't have the password to any of his social media accounts. He never actually goes on there. It's true. You almost never see him commenting, right? Even like, or responding to posts, or I don't know if it's him or not or whatever, but apparently he doesn't have the passcode. He doesn't want to even look at the numbers. He doesn't want to respond. He doesn't but he goes out there. Um, so it seems like not only does it seem like this is possible, but it seems like, um, the people who are actually being the most successful are the people who are doing this. Why do you think that? Why do you? And there's other people that I know, Ryan Holiday, and maybe not Gary Vaynerchuk. Maybe he's like always on his phone. I don't know. But like there's a lot of people who also just seem to do it. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's definitely a luxury that you talk about in the Warren example, especially of like, we find a lot of celebrities gravitating to the light phone, but, they probably have a personal assistant that's calling their car and managing their calendar and sort of offsetting some of these things that maybe a normal user might feel that they would need to have a smartphone for. But I think for the latter example, like, I talk to a lot of artists who feel that social media is one of the best outlets for them to promote their work, find new clients, and grow as a sort of their own brand. But I think there's a lot of illusion on that productivity angle. Like, obviously, the internet is amazing. Kaiway and I used Kickstarter to launch this phone and reach an audience that no real investor believed actually existed until we proved it by finding them and showing that these people are, you included, willing to give us $100 towards making this new film. And I think what I found is a lot of artists find that like working on the quality of the work, the quality of the writing, the quality of the content that you're putting out pays way more in terms of value than constantly monitoring, constantly checking does. I think there's a sort of illusion of productivity when you sign into this thing and you answer the questions or you check the boxes that you're doing something when actually a lot of times that can become a distraction from doing the actual work. So I've talked to a lot of artists that, pre-plan a lot of their quote unquote marketing materials. They might pre-plan the posts on their computer so that when they're in the studio, they're not thinking about Instagram. But that's definitely a part of their holistic strategy as an artist, but they sort of separate that as like the job part, like how they have to send an invoice or pay taxes. They also have to market themselves, but it's not like they're in the studio just checking Instagram and being upset about a comment and then that's throwing off their productivity. They're, there to focus on the music and then they share it and they sort of separate those in a really interesting way. And I think there's, probably some merit to like why some of those users that you mentioned are so successful online is because they're not, just reacting to trends online. They're like genuinely sharing what they're thinking deeply about, it seems.
It's really interesting. I think you actually just changed my opinion about something because I've always felt, I work with a lot of like clients and stuff about, with their personal brand and stuff like online. And, one of the things I always tell them is like, forget about content calendars, get rid of your content calendar because that's not the way people use social media. The way people use social media is they have a phone, something happens, they take a picture, they upload it and, they don't sit and pre-plan their posts like it's some sort of marketing thing. But you're making me actually kind of double think that like that maybe actually that is the smarter approach because one of our other philosophies is that you shouldn't be, it's not about what you post, it's about what you do. So it's like that Ben Franklin line, which is like you can write things worth reading or you can do things worth writing about. And we always say that you should do things worth writing about in the sense like do things and that you're doing things and other people are posting about you. You don't even need to post about yourself, right? And stuff like that. So the light phone definitely is one of these tools that could possibly make that happen because it forces you to be more present in your work and in what you're doing. And so I just found what you just said really interesting because it reverses my philosophy in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure pre-planning definitely has plenty of its faults and artificiality, and so it's probably about finding a balance. But I think like that sort of anecdote you used, like, yeah, if you do something good enough, I've kind of always believed that other people will talk about it. And then it sort of has some of its own self-viral potential, so to speak.
But like your light phone, the newest version has a camera on it, right?
Yeah.
So I'd assume that if you have your light phone on you and like something happens, you can take a picture like, hey, in the middle of this painting, what do you think? And then like you take the picture and like you just upload it later and you post it later, right? You can't, obviously you're not doing it from the light phone. So it's kind of like going back to like, a camera, like what it used to be. And it's like you said, creating the limitation of these tools. That you're
Yeah, because I
surrounding
think,
yourself. What was the philosophy called again that you said? That the design
oh,
philosophy?
designed to be used as little as possible.
But you had like a name for it.
Oh,
I
I
thought you did.
guess I like what we call the experience going light, and then like in terms of the design choices for the light phone, everything was to be used as little as possible. So the form factor, the interface, the limitations was all with the intention that yeah, you're out and about in the world.
Joe, I'd be really curious to ask you. It seems like you're in the forefront of just kind of the intentional use of technology, and we're more or less a generation, I guess, into smartphones and social media and such. And obviously, in this first generation of it, it's clearly impacted our society's mental health, and what I think we would all agree is a relatively negative way. We've all loved it. We've all gotten addicted to it, but we all kind of know that it's not good for us. And I'd like to believe that people are starting to realize that at this point, and then through, market forces, we're gonna start demanding different functionality in terms of the way that especially social media works for us, because we just know that it's hurting us as opposed to just treating it like junk food all the time. Do you see changes happening, not just in the way maybe we're using our devices, but maybe in the way that social media and such is going to be working as people try to self-regulate and be more intentional in using it, or with algorithms and these companies just continue to do more things that just kind of like feed our dopamine hits?
Well, I can't say I'm terribly optimistic, but what I do feel like is that the inherent business models behind these platforms, which is, we give you this free product at the expense of you technically being the product that is then sold
Right.
via data and targeted ads to the actual customer of theirs. I think that feels like it's the culprit of a lot of these issues and why social media exists the way it is, as aggressively, feeding off of our vulnerabilities, engineered by some of the smartest minds off of our vulnerabilities. So I'm always sort of posing the question of like, what might social media look like if, let's say, you had to pay for it and the business model was flipped upside down, and instead of
Mm.
it being free and we are the product, what if we actually were the customer, and social media was then incentivized to bring us value? Like I always say, the way it exists, it can't possibly align with our quality of life, because unless we're spending as much time as we spent yesterday and a little bit more tomorrow, they're actually a shrinking business. So they're perpetually trying to get us to spend more time, whereas that's sort of almost universally agreed to be pretty detrimental to our mental health, and obviously a waste of time, and deteriorating attention spans, and all these other things that have been studied in the last 10 to 15 years. So I sort of don't feel like the change has happened yet, and I've seen some small examples of like websites, smaller, more niche platforms that do sort of run on this kind of more transparent and charging model. And I think, the light phone, we've always charged for our phone. And, we're proud that we don't have any backdoor revenue streams. But that is why a simple phone like Light Phone 2 costs $300, or the Light Phone 3 costs $600, because, we're making this product and we're going to support it for years to come. And we don't have any interest or need for your data or upselling you different services. So I wonder what the equivalent of that would look like for other platforms that we find ourselves so vulnerable. And, news really struggles with it. That's like one we talk less about, but because people are so unwilling to pay for news and quality news, then we get this really clickbaity kind of like ridiculously pop-up ad news thing. And it's almost like the quality has gone down so bad because it's trying to live in this business model, but customers don't feel willing to necessarily always pay for the quality of the work and the journalism. And you can see that analogy across a lot of different platforms. So,
That's
yeah,
such a fascinating question. It really is a fascinating. Well, what would social media look like if you didn't if you had to pay for it? I'd imagine that it wouldn't have exist if you didn't. But now that it does exist, and if someone came out with, like, imagine if TikTok right off the bat was like, hey, we have this like amazing tool and it's amazing and it's addictive and it's this, but to get in you have to pay $1, or $3 or $5. But that's a really
You
fascinating
could just
question.
make it you pay by the time, or you pay for premium content,
By the time,
as some parents try to do, you force your kids to go out and exercise for 30 minutes before they want 30 minutes of screen time. Like there's other incentive structures that we could build in to get it. And I think if we were paying in any one of those formats, wouldn't we use our time there a little bit more intentionally, and maybe not just like doom scroll?
I
yeah.
think
And
there
I would
is an
even
app where.
go,
Sorry, go on.
I would say I'd go as far as to say, like, I don't even think they'd want it to be addictive if they weren't incentivized. They'd actually be probably wanting you to spend less time on it and keep paying each month, because they're having to pay to send you all of this data and
Mm.
stuff. And if they're not selling your data, if it was a more honest transaction, they'd be like, hey, here's the 10 things that you should care about with your closest friends. And then, like, okay, you're done. The app is done for now. There's nothing else to see. Like, you never get that moment on Instagram. It's never like, you saw it all. You can close us now. And so that's almost what I wonder what might happen if, like, social media was like, hey, you and you are both on here. You guys should hang out tonight or something, like if it was like trying to actually connect us in some way to get off the app. But who
It,
knows? Maybe
it's
that's wishful
super.
thinking.
It's super interesting because I once we had on the podcast earlier Andrew McLuhan, who is Marshall McLuhan's grandson,
Oh wow,
um, and
big
he was
fan of
telling
Marshall.
us we can make an introduction. He would love to talk with you. Let's make sure we make that introduction. He would love to talk with you. He brought up something. I don't think it was on the podcast actually, but he once brought something up in another conversation about um, artificial, not about what are the goggles?
VR.
VR, virtual reality. And he said, interestingly enough, he thinks that virtual reality is actually the solution to the infinite scroll, because when you put on these glasses, you can't spend forever in there. So you go in and you play a game, or you go and meet somebody in a virtual world, and you sit down and you have a conversation. And then when you take off the virtual reality glasses, you bring out with you the meaning. Like you got something usually out of it: exercise, fun, entertainment, a distraction, or or a meaningful conversation. But it ends at a certain point because the battery ends. It gets uncomfortable. You have to take it off. He said, "Now I don't know what happens when it becomes like a contact lens or something like that." But the point is, um, and so he's like, and that was the first time I ever started thinking about the infinite scroll, because you're not going to put this thing on and then scroll through Instagram on your VR headset. I mean, they have the ability to do that, but it's not the same thing. And so it's kind of it's kind of an interesting thing because it's such an advanced technology. Um, but it's also somewhat answering what you're saying. I'm not saying to incorporate VR into the light phone, but
Well, I mean, yeah, I'd be nervous that maybe it would be susceptible in the long term for its own equivalent of something that was keeping you. But to that same vein, like there's other products that were trying to come out, like this AI pin that was like a screenless phone experience. And though in a way they're sort of taking the opposite approach of the light phone, the most tech using AI and whatever, but the fact that it was voice centric did inherently mean you weren't going to scroll Instagram on it. And so in a way, we had more synergy, I think, than was maybe obvious at the front. We were approaching the problem from such a different angle, but in a way, a voice commanded AI portal is actually more aligned with the light phone in terms of like, well, we don't want you to be looking at this phone all day.
that
There
that's
is
that's
this overlap.
that's right. You had a competitor there for a little bit, right? Like this human, what was it called?
Mhm.
Human, right?
Humane, I think, but yes,
Humane or
something like that.
something. So like that's interesting. So why do you think that it failed?
Well, I never got my hands on the product itself, but I think they're probably the hardware probably didn't live up to the dream, like the hypothesis that people were ready to make this jump. Uh, is an interesting one, but I think there's a lot of hurdles to get there. I heard, a lot of complaints about the actual quality of using that day to day. I think personally, I can't imagine like I'd want my text messages just read out loud. Like I'm on the subway
Oh.
and it's going to be like reading out loud and I have to be like, no, mom, like, it's like,
Yeah.
so I feel like there's, some interface moments that felt awkward in it. And so I don't know exactly why I failed, but I think it was interesting to see more different things than just like Apple's big smartphone versus Samsung's big smartphone versus Google or nothing's big smartphone. To see something drastically different was interesting, but I can't imagine me personally using that
It's
in my
it
day to
means
day life.
like the move was there for it, right? And like kind of what you were saying before too, with how people are using the light phone, and it's like there is this anxiety about getting to my email and getting to this, and perhaps maybe AI is even the solution to that. Like if you like, or I'm not famous enough to have an assistant, but now with AI, as it gets better and better, I can have this sort of assistant, right? That I know that at least it's queuing up the important emails, or at least it's doing something so that when I open up my laptop, everything will be neatly organized. Um, uh, we don't like to usually go down the AI rabbit hole because once you start talking about that, it's like, but with you, it's kind of a more interesting conversation because I think like right now, I'll tell you what's going on in my head. I'm like, to me, the ultimate device, because I hate my iPhone. I hate my iPhone. I would love to get the iPhone. I'd love to get the light phone. The new version, I've just been made aware of it. It has these directions, so now I'm strongly considering it. Like the ideal for me would be like, okay, the light phone, and then I have what are the other two tools that I use more than anything? I have one of these little Plod Note things. I don't know if you've seen like the wearable ones, like, and then you've probably my Remarkable tablet,
The
which I
remarkable,
use
yeah, for sure.
much more than anybody else. And I was like, can you imagine like light phone, Remarkable tablet, Plod rolled into one device? It's like note take on it and this and that. Um, like that's where my brain is going, and it, that's like the ultimate anti tool, right?
Yeah, and I think that kind of like everyday carry is going to vary person to person a little bit. But I think the
Right.
idea, like I've always found that having dedicated tools is just generally more pleasurable, but sometimes more practical experience. Like answering emails on my iPhone when I had it years ago wasn't a good experience. Yeah, maybe I saw this email on a cab and I was able to blast something off, but I'm so much more sane and calm and productive. And I have all my files when I'm here with my laptop, full size keys, full size screen. And I'm like, this is time I've carved out to do my email. And I'm not just kind of like, rushing a frantic thought because I got it and I feel like they're expecting a reply this second. I'm like, sort of simmering with it. So I like separating the things. Like I still bring a film camera with me. It's amazing that the new phone has a camera, but like even that camera is something different. Like when I see a sort of artful moment, I still want to capture it with my film camera. And I love that
Film
it
rather
has a
than
big
digital.
lens. Yeah, I never really used
Wow.
digital cameras much other than for video stuff. So most of the like phone branding was shot on film. But even a digital camera, like I think the form factor of a real camera, it's around my neck. I don't have to like pull it out of my pocket. I'm just like, and like that almost takes priority for my day. And it's like the phone is in my pocket in case someone calls. But and then if I'm on the go or Kaiway is like, hey, what do the new hats look like? I could shoot him a photo, or like, what's the menu at the restaurant? I could shoot a photo now. And so the camera and this has been really practical and useful, but I still have these other tools. Like I still have my paper notebook in my pocket all the time, even though we have a notes tool. Like I'm more expressive with my notes in here. I'm able to draw arrows and, you know, whatever.
Yes.
But there's times last night I was at this restaurant and a song I hadn't heard in forever came on the radio, so I typed it down in my notes tool. So I was like, okay, today I can remember to check that song out again. So
Right.
it's like I'm glad that I have both, but there's something just so nice about this one. And then like now I have a pile of moleskins I've collected over the years, and it's like this beautiful thing, and it's not just like my iPhone notes were just like so disposable.
Yeah, no, I have my. I don't use Moleskine. I use what's it called, the Lecturum.
Oh, to
Uh,
be honest, I use that brand too. I'm just like
oh, you
saying
do?
moleskin. It's like a
Okay.
Kleenex thing.
I think it's
Yeah.
an SVA thing too. I think that was the one that everyone was telling to use there. But is there a God? There's it. Oh, what you were saying again resonates with me. Like today, with the kids and stuff, and I'm like, oh, I gotta get like this. I had like this idea for like this post, and so I just went and I went and I opened up my LinkedIn app, and I start typing, and then I'm like, what am I doing? I should just like wait until I get to my computer. But then I was also thinking to myself, where do I jot down this note? You know, and it was like really overwhelming. And so like the technology ends up creating more problems than it like does solutions, because now I don't even know how to remember things anymore by myself. It is there a what is light? What is the light philosophy of AI right now? What are you guys thinking about?
I mean, to be totally honest, we don't really have any intention to incorporate it in the foreseeable future, but I think we're not naive enough to just completely dismiss it. So Kai and I are paying attention, hearing out some ideas our users have, and dabbling in our own experiences with AI to see how it might be useful. And I can potentially imagine a world where AI is able to be that kind of assistant. And instead of having to even open the calendar tool on the light phone, if you're able to be like, hey, make a meeting for next Thursday at 7 p.m. We're going to this restaurant. Like that is actually using the phone even less. If we're going back to this design to be used as little as
Mhm.
possible, AI could potentially help achieve that goal. I think right now in the short term, there's a lot of concerns around sustainability of AI, environmental impacts, the ethics
Yeah.
of some of the platforms that are leading the charge.
Mhm.
We did some tests, and users make their own experiments where they use SMS and create a server and text a GPT, so they get some sort of AI interface on the light phone. Some good things are that there's friction, there's a cost to that, so they're maybe not just using it every time they're bored. But we actually found that the useful thing that came from that study was the creation of our directory tool, was being able to look up a place's address, time that they're open, hours, and phone number. And we said, if this is the thing that we're finding useful from it, let's just make a tool that does that really well. So we made a directory tool from that. Other things that we found ourselves or people looking up were a lot more frivolous, and we actually felt like against the ethos of light. So yeah, I'm out and about. I maybe want to remember who was in that one movie that we're talking about. And I think something beautiful about the light phone experience is that when you don't have that immediate answer, you're sort of forced to sit there and think like, well, how does that work? Or who was that? And, eventually it comes to you and you're like, it's that guy. And I think, people describe the impact they've had in like regaining their memory from using a light phone. So I feel
That's
like
really interesting.
there'd be a missed opportunity if people had that immediacy where you might just be waiting for a train and asking silly questions just to occupy yourself. So as much as possible, we're trying to avoid that side of things, but I can imagine a world where AI was very useful, like how some of these other tools are useful. And technically, like our voice to text, it does really good voice transcription. Like, if I was like, hey, I'm on my way, and it would translate, like that uses a form of AI. We pay for it so that it's a private user experience. Um, but that's a very subtle form of AI. AI is such a buzzword that
Right.
people are thinking that like we're going to be making it so you can have your own emojis or whatever Apple's doing.
I'm curious, Joe, are there
So,
certain segments that are of
uh,
the society that are maybe adapting this more and being more intentional? Because I could think, maybe there's young people who are more intentional. Maybe it's, as a parent, I have a 13-year-old now who doesn't have a phone yet, but really, really wants one. He's like the last one in his class and he wants a phone. But I'm thinking like, I would love, first step, let's give him a phone, like a light phone, right? And he'd probably freak out when every one of his friends has an iPhone if I gave him that. But I would see like as parents, it's really a nice solution as like, maybe the gateway before we give them a smartphone. I know in parts of the Orthodox community, there's an idea of like a kosher phone that's been around for a long time that hasn't had internet. But like, where do you see the most adoption?
Yeah, I'd say at a high level, it's been a really wide spread of demographics, which is really interesting and promising in a world where everything gets so sort of divided. But some interesting ones are like, I think naturally we kind of assume that these sort of freelance 25 to 40-year-olds that maybe work pretty heavily on the computer day to day and struggle with this kind of like online, offline because they have email in their pocket. That is definitely one sort of market, but we've seen like a big interest from the Bible Belt, whether that's parents buying it for kids as a first phone or actually more often parents buying it because they have a newborn and they want to be a better role model and spend more quality time with their kid. We hear anecdotes of like, I was holding my newborn, scrolling my smartphone, realizing that they're looking up at me, I'm ignoring them, and I'm looking at something that's pissing me off about some problem that I can do nothing about around the other side of the world. And like, why am I doing this in this moment? Um, and so buying the phone for that, we've definitely seen an uptick, although not, an overwhelming majority of younger generation. But I think people, high schoolers and college students, are feeling burnt out from being on social media most of their,
Already at those young ages, it's incredible.
yeah, and so I can only imagine how exhausting that must be. Uh, and so some get it for those sort of social reasons. Others are like, hey, take out $100,000 a year to go to this PhD program, and I need to focus, and, make the most of it. So as a productivity tool, we see that a lot. Some people get it as like an outdoors enthusiast that like doesn't want to bring the smartphone with them, when they're at the campsite and then accidentally find themselves checking sports stats or something else when they should just be enjoying this, weekend away from screens. So it's been really amazing to see all the ways it fits. Recovering porn addicts is a market we never would have imagined might gravitate
Hmm.
towards the light phone. But there are people, very many of them, that like that is a serious problem, and the light phone is a potentially great solution for it.
Mhm. Is there the
Wow.
ability to be able to switch back and forth? I mean, maybe that's a technical question. Like if I have an iPhone and I use it for parts of my life, but I
Yeah,
also want to
there's
have a
not
light phone for
a
other times of my
ton of
life to be able to just have the same phone and report.
I think most users do tend to go more full-time light phone. At each step of the way, Apple and carriers don't make it very easy to switch between the two. But historically, it has been as easy as popping your SIM card between one phone and the other, especially when physical SIM cards were the norm. So we had a lot of users use the phone that way. What I'm seeing more these days is people getting two phones and actually separating the phone number between their work life and their personal life. So maybe I'm a freelance hairstylist or tattoo artist. And, while I have my gear, I also have a smartphone with Venmo and Square and all the other apps you might need to run that side of your business. And then you have your personal phone, and maybe you forward just the calls from the work phone, and you delegate who has which number so that you can better
That's
manage your
interesting.
online offline. So that's been a really cool thing that I think for so long Americans identify as their phone number. Like I've had this number since I was 13 years old or something. And it's cool to see people be like, actually, I can have a work number and a this number, and it doesn't have to all be the same number. So that's been a new trend I've seen too.
You can get like a Mint Mobile number, right? And does Light Phone work with Mint Mobile?
Yeah, people get
Oh,
it does. And I mean, even if you had an existing smartphone plan, it's often like $10 more to get like a second line for it that shares the data, and the light phone uses next to no data essentially.
wow. You're just talking. One of the major themes throughout was this idea of delegation, which I think has become sort of a forgotten art, right? Because if you have this delegation of your time, that seems to be like a missing thing. You keep talking about it. You apply that to your own life, obviously, uh, and even I guess somebody who doesn't buy the light phone. That's probably would that be like your suggestion of like the first place where they should start in terms of limiting their technology?
Yeah, I think that's super valid. There's an author, Cal Newport. He made
Mhm.
a couple of really awesome books. One was Deep Work, one was Digital Minimalism. And I think he frames it exactly as that, is like assessing our digital products that we use and seeing the ones that give us the biggest benefit, and how do we keep those in our lives, and then being honest about the ones that are taking up vast majority of our time and making us maybe feel bad at the end. And so almost like Marie Kondoing your digital life could probably do wonders with or without going to a full light phone. So that's been super cool to see.
We loved your full page ad, by the way, to open letter to Tim Cook.
So cool that
Um,
you guys saw that.
did he respond?
No.
No. Okay. But you did get a lot of response from people, so I guess that's the ultimate. I'm sure he saw it.
I mean, I want to think so, but I think, yeah, the interesting thing was that like it poked enough interest that like our thinking was just like we don't really have a budget to do any marketing in a way that's going to get a lot of visibility unless people find the idea clever enough to share on their own. So we tried to
Of course.
be clever to get a larger reach, and I think that campaign actually worked pretty successfully for us in bringing awareness to what we were talking about. And you know, uh, I actually like don't hate Apple. Like I think their
Right.
intentions could be well. They're not their business model, at least historically, isn't to just keep you hooked on their devices. It's to make the best possible X, Y, and Z. Now they're getting a little bit more into these service industries, and it's getting a little bit trickier. But
Right.
you know, and the things that Tim were saying, for context, the campaign basically used a lot of Tim Cook's words about if you're getting 1,000 notifications a day, you're doing the thing wrong. You're not supposed to be looking at the phone more than your friend's eyes. And we were just like, yeah, we agree, and put them on billboards, trying to,
It's like ads for the light phone.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. I mean that was brilliant marketing. It really was really brilliant. Old school. Even using the analog, uh, mediums. I mean, it makes a lot of sense for you to do that. Um, there's no light phone app, right? Is there like? Have you
not
thought about
yet.
like an app that like there's that tool Brick that will brick your iPhone and
Yeah, I mean, I think with the first light phone, we tried to do a deeper integration, and you sort of experienced that little sort of
yeah,
hacky
I remember. Yeah,
call forwarding thing
yeah,
that we dabbled with. Like, we just encountered the ecosystem of Apple being such a closed wall and always changing. Like, maybe we build this product and then they come up with a new update, and now we don't have permission to do that thing anymore. So it felt like a losing game. And I think there was also this feeling that the smartphone itself as an object, because we've done some testing where users would delete their most problematic apps. So for a week or three, they would, take off their social media if that was it, or whatever app, and for a few days they'd have really low screen time, and then there'd be a new culprit. So if like it was Instagram before, now they're shopping or reading Reddit or something else. And it's just because you get home, you pull out your phone and you just want to use it as a nervous crutch versus, you know, maybe picking up something else and doing something else. It's such an easy thing. So we actually felt strongly that like making a physical product that felt different and had a completely different experience and relationship to the object itself was important. But I think if some of these other solutions work for you as a user, as simple as like making your phone black and white and deleting a few apps, like that's free. You can try that today. And like whether that's like a first step into maybe getting a phone like a light phone, or that's sufficient, I think, I totally encourage those. Even something as simple as just like leaving your phone completely at home for like 30 minutes to go for a walk. You'll realize how different you feel just leaving your
right.
phone with no light phone, no anything.
The ultimate, like not the ultimate. I gotta tell you, I am definitely going to be starting to recommend. It's funny when we start working with clients or whatever. The first thing I tell them is you have to be off social media for a week before we can start working together. I need you to detox. I need you to get like all of the stuff out of your brain and all the comparison stuff. We got to start fresh. And I think recommending to our clients that they get a light phone, and start doing it because we're very much into, you know, personal branding and all this stuff. It starts from within, right? You have to fix yourself in order to fix your content and stuff that's going out. And I definitely think that the light phone, this idea of delegation, or at least at the very least, this idea of delegation with the technology, is such an important thing and it's like this overall philosophy. The light phone to me is like, seems like it's like the product of your philosophy. Like this is how I'm going to, this is how we're going to do it. So really like fascinating. I love this. And I love hearing about the progression. When I was talking with you, I'm like, I think I bought the first one, and like to see where it's gone now is really amazing.
So cool. It's so
Yeah.
cool that you're one of the first users. And, I don't think when we started the original light phone, we ever could have imagined that this would be exactly where we found ourselves. But I think the opportunity just made itself more and more obvious that we're like trying the light phone one, realizing like, actually, I don't like having a smartphone with me, but I need an alarm, and texting is important because my bank sends me these codes. So then
Right.
it's not that we're going down this slippery slope of a smartphone, but we're just like, how could we replace the smartphone? Because I think that would change lives. And to be honest, it's been pretty humbling to see some of the profoundly positive lifestyle changes some users have accomplished. And obviously, the phone is just a catalyst for these changes, like any gym membership or diet change. Like there's a lot of work on your part to actually do the heavy lifting, but the phone might be that catalyst you need to snowball that positive change.
Joe, can you share with me
Amazing.
approximately how many devices have been sold, just to get a sense for the size of the movement a little bit?
Yeah, we don't say too precise in numbers, but for the first two generations of phones, we've sold over 100,000,
Awesome.
which in the scheme of like a phone company is completely nominal compared to like Apple or Samsung or likes. But I think for us, it's, it just shows that there is a growing interest year over year and people wanting something different from their phone. And so, yeah, I mean, we're
Well, if you compare
incredibly
yourself
humbled
to,
by
how
that.
many iPhones are sold, that's one comparison. But if you look at
Yeah.
100,000 people who have joined this movement of trying to be more intentional in their life, that's very powerful.
Totally agree.
I'd love to have you on, and I want to be very cognizant of the time because we're a little bit over. I'd love to have you on some other time, and so that we can talk about how you do end up sort of promoting yourself, with this philosophy of yours. Because I do really truly believe that if you made yourself more out there and more whatever, found a way to do that, that it would sort of go beyond just even selling the phone. I mean, like just like almost guru status, right? About really helping people practically figure out how to do this with their lives, like how to use technology, how to regulate themselves, how to do that. I mean, you should really write a book. I mean, based on the conversation that we've had, I think like the light book. I don't know what that is, but I would love to talk to you at some point more. I'll have you on a podcast to talk about that again at some point. But I just want to be very cognizant of time. And so the Light Phone 3 is on pre-order right now.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
just started shipping a week ago, so we had our launch moment, which is super exciting. But as a small production, we're making our way through the outstanding pre-orders, which we're so grateful for. So yeah, it's still probably about a few months from a pre-order to delivery. We're working as fast as we can to keep the production ramping up, but it's amazing that like I saw my first Light Phone 3 in the wild last week. And
Oh, that's so cool.
based on how
Did you
few
go
were
up to the person and was like, I built that, or no? You just like left them
not
alone?
in not in those exact words, but I was like, "Is that a light phone? What do you think of it?" And then they realized I had one too.
And then who you were. Oh, that's awesome. And so I'm looking at the thing. If you order one now, it'll come in July, and it's $5.99 now, but I imagine after July it'll be $7.99.
Yeah, we haven't 100% committed to the final retail price. There's so many moving parts. Like we'd like to keep the price at $5.99 to be totally honest, but in light of these trade war conversations that are changing on
Mm-hmm.
a daily, weekly basis. We're not entirely sure, but our goal is to keep it as low as we possibly can. But yeah, unfortunately, there's some unknowns. We also want to make sure we're honest and sustainable so that we can keep shipping real software updates month over month for years and years to come. So making sure we charging enough that we are not,
Well, I am
sacrificing
going
that.
to be pre-ordering one right after this. I'll tell you that.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Now it has everything. Now it's got everything that I want. The note to me, it's a note taker, the directions. Man, I don't want the calendar. I don't even want that. But yeah, it's like the music's important, I guess. Cool. Aaron, do you want to do the lightning?
Yeah. So, Joe, we're almost out of time, but we like to wrap up with a quick rapid question round where we're going to ask a couple quick questions. You just give your first thought, one word, one sentence, quick. Ready? All right. So, most underrated analog activity.
Walking.
All right. One tech trend that needs to disappear.
I wanted to say AI, but that's too that's too generic. Screens on washer machines.
Screens everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, screens everywhere. AI, like Wi-Fi everywhere. Just why does a refrigerator need to connect to my Wi-Fi?
Texting or calling.
I called personally, yeah.
One feature you'd never add to the Light Phone.
Social media, but that seems so obvious.
Yeah. Being that you're not on your phone, what's the first thing you do in the morning when you wake up?
Hang out with my cat and brush my teeth.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee. Oh, I love tea. But coffee is what I go to first.
And since you're on your Light Phone all the time, what's one app that you secretly miss?
Sounds so basic, but a metronome would be really cool for playing along piano and guitar and stuff.
What's the biggest misconception that people have about the Light Phone?
That they can't do it because it doesn't have this one app. Maybe I phrased that awkwardly, but the app that they think they need, they probably don't need as much, and it might actually change their life to not have it on them.
Boom. That's the lesson. That's the lesson right there. Like what you think you might know. I said this yesterday on a call. I was like, the treasure you seek is in the cave that you fear to go into the most. Right. And it's like, you think you need this direction app, but actually you probably would be better off if you didn't have GPS. Like that, like you said that earlier. And that, I think that is such a huge lesson there. Sorry,
Yeah,
go on, Aaron.
Yeah.
we had a mom.
Yeah,
I'm making this
go
not
on.
lightning, but it's a good anecdote. Like, afraid of not having a camera to document her kid, but she realized it was such a relief to not feel like she needed to capture every single moment and share it with the grandmas, the aunts, the uncles. So, it was like she was like going in like, oh, I'm gonna miss the camera so bad. And she's like, actually my favorite feature now that I'm trying it is not having a camera.
Yeah. We all grew up
So
okay.
I
Our
think
moms didn't have cameras on their phones.
yeah, there's
Not at
like
all.
12 pictures of me as a kid, and that's plenty.
What's one word to describe the future of tech?
A little bit dystopian.
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 And the last one I got for you, your personal brand and a hashtag.
I don't know. The word
It's
that
very
came to
on brand
mind
that you.
was chill, but I'm like, that seems like such a like stupid stoner reaction or something to say.
I mean,
Uh,
the fact that you're having trouble answering it is very on brand. It's like, I don't want a hashtag. It's like,
I don't know. My friends all think of me as a big walker, so that's like something that's on brand
walk,
for me. Is like I'm walking there. Hashtag I'm walking there.
walking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always like to ask two questions. The first one is, what is going to change in phone technology in the next, 5 to 10 years?
I think the form factor for sure, whether and like light phone's not a drastic one, but I think that AI pin, seeing glasses, and not that I'm a fan of any of these to watches, I think there is probably going to be a shift away from just big glass box. Foldables is one example, but I'm sure there's going to be a slew of things that we can't quite predict, or maybe we don't even want coming. But I think that's actually kind of okay and cool too.
So this next question I steal. That question is to lead up to this question, which I stole from Jeff Bezos. I watched a speech that he gave where he talking about what changes is cool, but really you should talk about what's not going to change. And he gives the example of with Amazon. He says, what's never going to change is that people want their products as quickly as possible and for cheap, right? So what's not going to change in the next 10 to 15 years when it comes to phone technology?
I think without sounding too much of just a light phone ad, that like time off a phone is always going to be more fulfilling than time on a phone. I'm thinking very specific about like time with family. I think universally humans have always needed that more than we realize. And so I
Beautiful.
think that's here to stay. Like, the feeling you get of being with your child, with your grandma, with your best friends, like even the group Snapchat, like that's never going to compare to IRL.
100%.
It's beautiful. Joe, this has really been incredible, and not just incredible, but inspiring. Like I'm coming out of this podcast, like actually inspired. Like I'm going to go buy the light phone. I'm going to regulate it. It'll probably last about a day until I get my light phone. But like it's like really inspiring to try to do. And at the end of the day, right? Even if at the end of the day I catch myself having scrolled for 15 minutes and I just sigh, at least just realizing that I did what I did is I guess the first part of the battle. And your story and your philosophy and your approach to rethinking technologies is well, I'm just going to say the word again, inspiring. So, really thank you for joining us. And good luck with the Light Phone 3. And we can't wait to see we can't wait to see the reaction. We can't wait to see more full page ads, more incredible billboards, more beautiful photography on t-shirts. And if people, now here's going to be a weird question. If people want to learn more about Light Phone, or actually not about Light Phone, if they want to go to Light Phone, they go to, thelightphone.com, right? If people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
I'm kind of taking myself out of a lot of the public spheres of the internet, but I think the Light Phone has a user community of Reddit and Discord, and I try to be pretty active there, and that's probably a pretty good insight. And I've done a lot of these sort of talks about the Light Phone. One day I aspired to bring my personal art life back into the public sphere, but for now I've been kind of a hermit with it, and it's been good for myself and the ego.
Sure. So if they want to learn more about you or get in contact with you, it's the Light Phone community on Discord or on Reddit. I love that answer. Because most people, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, I love that answer. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Joe.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. That was really fun.
Thanks for tuning in to the Genius Scouts podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes, and if you're ready to take your personal brand to the next level, visit geniusscouts.com.